Okay, we want to talk about the prison experiment. So it was a Stanford prison experiment, 1971. They set out to decide why people take certain roles, why do they conform to certain habits and attitudes. And they enlisted a bunch of college students. They were going to take part in a 2-week-long experiment. Now, some of the college students would be the prisoners, and the others would be the guards. So they started out, they arrested the individuals that were to be the inmates. They arrested them outside of their homes, and the results were quite disturbing, they had said. As far as prison goes, they know that prisoners and guards, they have different personalities. Make conflict really easy. Some prisoners, they lack respect for law enforcement and the guards. Some of these guards start going overboard, increasingly brutal, violent. Now, the people that were watching this experiment were under the idea that the people acted because of their situation, not because of their personalities or dispositions. So they set up a mock prison in the basement of a university building. They advertised for volunteers to participate in a study of the psychological effects of prison life. They had 75 people that answered. They got special thorough interviews by psychologists and psychiatrists. They were trying to eliminate anyone with psychological problems, medical kind of problems, or a history of indulging in breaking the law. So they got the 24 men that looked rather well. They fit into the molds of what they wanted for the experiment. They supposedly had the most physically and mentally proper people, most mature, people that were least involved in any kind of antisocial kind of behavior. Now, they were compensated $15 a day to take part in this experiment. They were randomly assigned to be either a prisoner or a guard. They had 10 prisoners, 11 guards. They treated the prisoners like criminals would be treated. They were arrested at their homes without warning, taken to the local police station, fingerprinted, photographed, and booked. Blindfolded and driven to the psychology department of the university in their mock prison. When they got there to the prison, they of course were stripped naked, searched, took all their personal possessions. They were given prison clothing, bedding, and uniform. And from this point on, they were referred to by their number. Their name was irrelevant. They decided they were going to use these ID numbers so they can make the prisoners feel anonymous. The prisoners were to be called only by their ID number and could only refer to themselves and the other prisoners by their ID numbers. They had clothes that had their number written on it. They had regular pants and shirts, but no underclothes. The guards, of course, were dressed in uniform, identical uniforms, carried a whistle, a billy club, and they wore special sunglasses, so that actually making eye contact with prisoners was virtually impossible. Now, the guards were instructed that they could do whatever they thought was necessary to maintain law and order in the prison. That's right, whatever they felt was necessary. They said, of course, that no physical violence was to be permitted. Now, they say that within hours of this experiment, some guards began to harass prisoners. 2:30 in the morning, prisoners were awakened from their sleep by whistles, with the guards rousting all of the people needlessly, very early hours of the morning. So as the guards were adopting guard-like behavior, the prisoners, they were adopting prisoner-like behavior. They spent time talking about the things of the prison that they didn't like. They, of course, talked about each other. Many were lies about the other person, telling rather false stories, trying to gauge some kind of a notch up, getting closer to the guards. They started taking the prison rules very seriously. Some of the prisoners thought this was very good. If they just followed the rules, everything would be pretty good. Some actually were siding with the guards against the prisoners, and especially any of the prisoners that did not obey rules. In the beginning, the prisoners were taunted with insults and given boring tasks to accomplish. They were trying to basically dehumanize these individuals. They went to push-ups as a common form of physical punishment. One of the guards stepped on prisoners' backs while they did push-ups, or made the prisoners sit on the backs of fellow prisoners doing their push-ups. Anything to make it a little more interesting. First day went, of course, without incident. Guards were surprised and rather unprepared for the rebellion that broke out on the second day. During the second day, the prisoners removed their stocking caps, ripped off their numbers, and barricaded themselves inside the cells by putting their bed against the door. The guards called in reinforcement. They had 3 guards waiting in standby. So the guards had to retaliate some way, so they began using fire extinguishers. They shot a stream of rather cold carbon dioxide, forced the prisoners away from the doors, and the guards broke into each cell, stripped the prisoners naked, and took the beds out of their cells. They sorted through the individuals there that were rebelling, and they found the leaders of the gang, placed these leaders of the gang in solitary confinement. After this rebellion, the guards definitely began to harass and intimidate prisoners. Over the next few days, they developed a relationship with each other between guards and prisoners. The guards were definitely firmly in control, and the prisoners were actually dependent on the guards. Unfortunately, as the prisoners became more dependent, the guards became more negative towards these individuals. The guards definitely made sure the prisoners know that they had contempt for them. As the prisoners began to realize that the guards were definitely against them, the prisoners decided they would get a little bit more submissive. As the prisoners got submissive, the guards got more aggressive, more assertive. 36 hours into this experiment, one prisoner began suffering from acute emotional disturbance. He was disorganized, thinking, he was crying, uncontrollable rage to go along with this. They had a meeting with the guards, and they told him he was weak, but they decided they would offer him informant status. Soon this prisoner just began to lose it completely. Began to act crazy. He was screaming and cursing, flew into uncontrollable rages. About this time, the psychologist watching this decided they had perhaps better let this individual out. Unfortunately, the guards decided they were going to escalate their harassment, forcing these prisoners to do menial, repetitive work while the toilet cleaning was handed out. Cleaning the toilets with bare hands. Yeah, that's right. Eventually, another prisoner, again, had a breakdown, had to be removed from the experiment. This experiment was originally going to run for 2 weeks, but on the 6th day, they took a really good hard look at this experiment, and they decided that the emotional breakdowns of these prisoners and the excessive aggression of the guards, it would be a rather good idea to call a halt to this experiment. They concluded that these guards, placed in a position of authority, all of a sudden took a different course than they would have normally in life. They began to act ways that they just normally would not have acted. The guards seemed to report that after they got used to these uniforms, they seemed to have lost their own personal identity. They interviewed most of the people involved with the experiment. One individual said he was actually surprised at himself. He couldn't believe it, that he would abuse his authority as a guard, making the prisoners call each other names, forcing them to clean the toilets out with their bare hands. He said that he actually basically considered the prisoners to be cattle, and that all they had to do was watch out that they didn't try to escape. Many of the guards reported that the individuals who were the guards, many of them stated that they found that actually received personal pleasure from doing these things to the prisoners. Overall, the guards were kind of surprised. They really didn't believe that they had been brutal to these prisoners. Most of them revealed that this was a side of their personality that they'd never seen, never even knew that they had part of this in them. So this all boils down to one of the experiments that the consensus would be they really shouldn't have done it. When they did the end analysis, they decided that they really couldn't judge what happened here onto the realm of real prisons because everyone had volunteered for this and they knew it was just an experiment and a pretend job of being in prison. I guess this little experiment did show that there's more parts of a human being than you can believe. That there's a good, a bad, all mixed together in each individual. It's just, what is it going to take to bring it out in that individual? Most people never know until the situation occurs. Safe to say that all of us are rather complex individuals. There's so much that makes up what we are as humans. Everything we do, everything we see, kind of adds to what's inside our brains. How we were treated, if we were loved, if we were not loved, it all makes us into a special, unique individual. Quite interesting. Anyway, that's it for the prison experiment. Please, thank you very much for watching the video. Please like, subscribe, share with like-minded friends, and feel free to leave a comment. Take care. Bye for now.